copyright. Unauthorized use may result in legal liability. Snow trap. Damn. I gripped the steering wheel, struggling to keep the car on the road, but it swayed from side to side like a paper boat in a storm. The headlights were swallowed helplessly by the white haze, and the wipers scraped against the windshield as if pleading for mercy. Visibility, almost zero. Just a swirling snow wall, endless and relentless. The blizzard struck suddenly. When I left the city, the snow fell softly, almost lazily, but the further I drove along the country highway, the more aggressive the storm became. The wind tore through the sky, hurling icy clumps at the car. The road disappeared under drifts. The lane markings had long since vanished, and now I was driving almost blindly. I glanced at the dashboard. 40 miles to home. Not much. Just 40 miles. A sharp jolt. The car suddenly jerked left. I instinctively slammed the brake pedal, but instead of slowing down, the vehicle skidded violently. The wheels lost traction, and I felt them bounce against the icy surface. I was being dragged toward the roadside. No, not now. I gasped, gripping the wheel desperately. Too late. The front wheels sank into the loose snow, and the car came to a halt. I pressed the accelerator again, but all I heard was the pathetic whine of spinning tires. I tried rocking the car back and forth. Useless. Damn it. I switched off the engine and reached for my phone. 3% battery. My fingers trembled as I found Lauren's number and hit call. Come on, pick up. Ringing. Once. Twice. 3 times. I clenched my jaw. The phone rang a 6th time before the call was dropped. The subscriber is unavailable or temporarily out of service. Oh, come on. I exhaled, running a hand over my face. I looked out the window again. Darkness, snow, a desolate road. No headlights, no streetlights, just the howling night. The phone screen flickered, then went black. Battery dead. Now I was completely alone. I clenched the phone in my hand, but it was lifeless. The dark screen reflected the same emptiness that surrounded me. Outside, the blizzard raged, drowning out all sound, as if the world had shrunk to the size of this little car, trapped in the middle of a deserted back road. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Panicking wouldn't help. The headlights illuminated only the storm, a wild, frenzied whirlwind where snowflakes spun like demons. The road was buried so deep it now looked like just another part of the snow-covered field. No lights. No sign of another car. Total isolation. I glanced at the dashboard again. The fuel would last through the night, but if I left the engine running, it would eventually suffocate in the snow. Leaning back in my seat, I pulled a pack of crackers from the glove compartment. Only a few left. The crumpled cellophane rustled in my fingers. I washed them down with tea from my thermos, feeling a brief warmth spread through me. Fleeting, quickly replaced by exhaustion. What time was it? I checked my watch. 8:30 p.m. For a second, I thought I saw distant lights, but when I looked closer, I realized it was just shadows playing tricks on me. No one. Not a single soul. I tried to remember the last time I had seen another car. Maybe 20 minutes ago. Maybe 30. It felt like I'd been stuck here forever. Snowflakes landed heavily on the hood, covering the car in a thick, white blanket. If no one passed by, if no one noticed me, I clenched my fists, trying to push away the uneasy thoughts. Someone would come. Someone had to. I didn't realize when I drifted off. The last thing I remembered was clutching the empty cracker wrapper, the thermos slowly losing its warmth in the cup holder, and the blizzard still howling outside. But now, something was different. I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was a silver glow filling the cabin. 10:05 p.m. I blinked, trying to process how long I had slept. Outside, silence. Heavy. Absolute. I sat up abruptly, looking around. The storm had stopped. The raging wind that had battered the car was gone, as if it had never been there. The snow had ceased falling. Everything outside had settled into a frozen stillness, as though someone had turned off the sound. I ran a hand over my numb face, rubbing my eyes. The cold had seeped through my clothes, wrapping around my shoulders. While I slept, the temperature inside had dropped. I looked at the windshield. The car was almost completely buried. Snow had draped over the hood like a thick blanket, sealing the side windows under a dense white veil. Only one small section of the windshield remained clear, where the faint heat from the engine had kept it from frosting over. I leaned in closer, squinting, and saw a clear night sky. The moon hung high, enormous, blindingly bright. Its light reflected off the snow, turning everything into icy silver. The trees, the road, the frozen drifts, it all looked surreal, as if I had stepped into a fairy tale winter world, not shaped by nature, but by some unknown force. But with this eerie beauty came another feeling. Anxiety. I suddenly realized just how lonely this place had become. Not a single car, not a single sound, only my snow-covered car, standing in the middle of a desolate road under the cold moonlight. I sat motionless, staring through the frost-covered glass. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the silvery veil of night, a light flickered. At first, I thought it was just the moonlight playing tricks on the snow. But no, it was real. A small, warm dot on the horizon, shimmering through the bare branches of the trees. I squinted, trying to gauge the distance. Roadside café, a motel? If my memory served me right, there should have been a small gas station with a diner in that direction. I remember the place. I had passed by a few times, but never stopped. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold stab into my lungs. There was light. There was warmth. There were people. And there, I could charge my phone. I wiggled my fingers to make sure they hadn't lost sensation. I just had to get there. Just walk. I reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Frozen shut. I pushed harder, but it didn't move. While I had been sleeping, the snow had encased the car so tightly that it had turned into an icy cocoon. Damn it. Frustrated, I bent my elbow and slammed the door with force. Once, twice. A dull crunch sounded as the frozen snow finally gave way a little. I yanked the handle again, and at last, the door creaked open, throwing me into the frigid air. The cold hit instantly. The sharp frost stung my face, seeping under my clothes, biting into my skin like icy fangs. The wind no longer howled, but it was still piercing, as if reminding me who was in charge here. I stood still, listening to the crunch of snow beneath my boots. Silence. No rustling. No distant hum of the highway. No nocturnal virson. Just my own breath, turning into a cloud of steam. I shut the door, shoved my hands into my pockets, and looked at the light. It seemed far, but reachable. The path to it led across the snow-covered road and onto a narrow trail weaving between the trees. The snow's depth was unpredictable, but staying in the car was pointless. I pulled up my jacket collar, swallowed hard, and took my first step. The snow immediately sucked at my boot, as if trying to hold me back. Not this time. I yanked my foot free and pressed forward. Slowly, step by step, stubbornly despite the cold. Ahead, warmth, light, and food awaited me. I trudged through the deep snow, each step a battle, but my thoughts had already drifted far from this deserted road, to where warmth and light were constant, where children laughed, where my wife kissed me goodnight. Home. My wife. Lauren. I'm an architect. I work from home, spending most of my time in my office, surrounded by blueprints and 3D models of future buildings. It is convenient. I set my own schedule. I see my children grow up. I am present in their lives rather than just existing nearby. Sometimes, like today, I travel for work. Briefly. Meetings with contractors, project discussions, negotiations. Usually, I am home in time for dinner, but today luck was against me, delays, and then the blizzard. Lauren was used to my schedule. She never complained, even when I spent nights in front of my computer constructing virtual frameworks for buildings. Maybe because she was the same way. She is a doctor, a surgeon. She works at a hospital in Chicago. Long shifts, emergency calls, grueling night duties. This was her life, just as architecture was mine. We have been together for over 15 years. We have 2 kids, a teenage son and a younger daughter. They love winter, just like I do. Every year, we have a tradition, family ice skating. We go to the park rink, bring hot chocolate, skate until late, laughing, falling, rolling in the snow. It had always been that way. But this year, everything changed. Lauren suddenly started avoiding these outings. At first, she blamed exhaustion. Too long of a day. Then work. I have to stay late at the hospital. And then She stopped making excuses altogether. She just disappeared. I did not notice it at first. Work consumed me, and I attributed her behavior to fatigue, winter, seasonal stress. But now, as I trudged through the snowy night, trying to reach the roadside cafe, my thoughts swirled, forming a strange mosaic. Something had changed. I could feel it in my bones, just like I could feel the cold creeping through my layers of clothing. I shook my head sharply, as if trying to shake away these ridiculous suspicions along with the falling snow. Nonsense. Everyone has hard times. Everyone experiences stress. Seasonal mood swings, overwork, exhaustion, that was all. Life is not a perfect commercial about happy families. This was normal. This was just winter, and I was too damn tired to let my mind wander down pointless roads. I focused on what really mattered, getting to the motel. Step by step. The snow was treacherous, its depth unpredictable. In one spot, just a thin layer. In another, my foot sank almost to my knee. My breathing grew labored, the frost gnawed into my bones. But finally, the lights drew closer. A building emerged before me. A small motel, the kind typical for these rural highways. The neon sign above the entrance glowed, North Star Inn. North Star, not the most original name, but somehow symbolic. Like a guiding beacon in this frozen wasteland. The motel was only 2 stories tall, a modest wooden building with a snow-covered roof, wrapped in twinkling string lights that cast a warm yellow glow. A covered porch led to the entrance, and on the first floor, a cafe with large panoramic windows glowed invitingly. I stopped, catching my breath. Inside, it was bright and cozy. Large windows revealed a welcoming space filled with wooden tables and soft armchairs. In the far corner, a fireplace burned, its flames casting warm flickers across the walls. A shiver ran through me, not from the cold, but from the anticipation of warmth. There was hot coffee. There were people. I could charge my phone and finally tell Lauren that I was stranded. I quickened my pace. My legs felt like lead, but now I had a goal. All that was left was to open the door, step inside, feel the heat envelop my frozen skin, and for a second, forget that the uneasy thoughts had not disappeared. I could already feel the warmth, even before stepping through the door. Through the large cafe windows, I saw a waitress working behind the counter, an elderly man in the corner flipping through a newspaper, leisurely sipping his coffee, someone laughing loudly at the far end of the room. Ordinary life. Simple, unremarkable scenes, exactly what I expected to see. But then my gaze caught on one of the tables, and I stopped. I blinked. Then again. No, this couldn't be. At the table, just a few steps from the window, sat Lauren. Her, my wife. Lauren was here, in this motel, far outside the city, in the middle of the night, when, according to her, she was supposed to be at the hospital. Something lurched in my chest, my breath caught. I stared at her, uncomprehending, trying to process what I was seeing. She was sitting across from a man. Tall, dark-haired, well-groomed. I didn't know him, but I saw the way he looked at her. I felt the way he looked at her. Calm, confident, with a faint smirk on his lips. A look that was too personal, too familiar. Lauren laughed. That sound, I had heard it hundreds of times at home, but now it was different. Light, effortless, too warm for just a conversation between colleagues. I exhaled sharply, realizing that my fingers were gripping the wooden railing of the porch with a death grip. Was this the dream? I was exhausted, frozen to the bone. Maybe I was hypothermic, hallucinating? Or was I dying right here in the snow, and my brain was feeding me the worst images imaginable? I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again. No, she was still there. She sat at that table real, alive. And at that moment, her hand rested on the man's palm across from her. I didn't move. I couldn't. The legs that had barely carried me through the snow minutes ago were now rooted to the ground. My lungs refused to function properly, my breathing shallow, tight, as if the cold air had turned into concrete. Lauren kept smiling. She was speaking, leaning forward slightly, her eyes gleaming with that same spark I'd seen when she told me about something important, something that truly mattered to her. But now, That look wasn't for me. It was for him. The man, who was he? I studied him intently. Maybe a colleague, maybe a doctor from her hospital. He wore a gray turtleneck sweater, an expensive watch glinting on his wrist. His hair was neatly combed back, his posture relaxed, his movements effortless, confident, as if he knew he had the right to be there. And Lauren, she wasn't just sitting next to him. She was allowing him to be close. She laughed. She tilted her head ever so slightly. That subtle, familiar movement I knew too well. It meant she was engaged, interested. And then I saw her hand. Those slender fingers, painfully familiar. Her palm rested on top of his, for longer than it should have. I swallowed hard, feeling something inside me crack. The man tightened his fingers around hers and said something, his lips twitching into a faint smirk. Lauren smiled back. Warm, easy, the way she once smiled at me. Damn. I gripped the wooden railing even harder, as if trying to hold on to something. No, this couldn't be happening. I was delirious, exhausted. This was a trick of the light, a distortion from the cold, just a ridiculous coincidence. But they were real, and what I was seeing, this was real too. I finally forced myself to look away. Something tightened in my chest, twisted painfully, but I pushed the feeling aside. Now was not the time. My head throbbed, my fingers barely moved, my clothes were frozen stiff. I was still trembling, and it was hard to tell whether it was from the cold or from what I had just seen. The entrance to the motel was on the other side of the building. I took a deep breath, shoved my hands into my pockets, and forced my legs to move in that direction. As soon as I stepped inside, I was enveloped by comforting warmth. The small lobby looked exactly as I had expected from a roadside motel. Wooden walls, a reception desk, a couple of old armchairs against the wall, a coffee vending machine in the corner. The air carried a cozy scent, a mix of coffee, cinnamon, and aged carpet. Behind the desk sat a woman in her 50s, short blonde hair, a green knitted cardigan. She looked up from her computer and greeted me with a friendly smile. Good evening. Can I help you? I need a room. My voice came out hoarse, and only then did I realize how dry my throat was. She glanced at her monitor, then back at me. Oh, it looks like we only have one room left. I let out a crooked smile. Lucky me, at least for something today. She quickly processed my check-in, and within minutes, I was holding a key card. Room 207, second floor. If you need anything, just call the front desk, she said with a warm smile. I just nodded and headed up the stairs. Once inside my room, the first thing I did was lock the door. I dropped my soaked jacket onto the floor and reached for the heater switch. The room was small but cozy. A wide bed, a nightstand with a lamp, a wardrobe, a TV. The bathroom was tiny, with a shower stall and a dimly lit mirror above the sink. I turned on the water and held my hand under the stream. Hot! I quickly shed the rest of my frozen clothes and stepped into the shower. The moment the hot water hit my skin, I shut my eyes and pressed my forehead against the cold tiled wall. My body slowly thawed, but inside, everything remained an icy mess. The image outside the window wouldn't leave my mind. Lauren, her laughter, her hand resting on another man's palm. I clenched my fists. Stop. Not now. Right now, I just needed to warm up, to pull myself together. The hot water streamed over me, bringing my frozen muscles back to life. I stayed under the spray longer than necessary, letting the heat wash away at least some of the tension. By the time I stepped out of the bathroom, my skin burned, and the air was still thick with steam. I pulled on a clean t-shirt, dry sweatpants, and sat on the bed. For the first time in hours, I felt my body start to relax. Charge the phone. That's what I need. I found an outlet by the bed and plugged it in. The screen flickered. The battery symbol appeared. Then I opened the room service menu. Burger, fries, coffee. I tapped the order and leaned back against the pillow. Now was not the time for confrontations. Not the time for questions. Now was only warmth, food, and a break. But deep inside, something else had started to flicker. Something I couldn't quite name yet. I ran a hand down my face and looked at my phone. The screen glowed, the battery at 6%. It was enough. I took a deep breath, scrolled through my call log, and pressed her number again. Ringing. Once. Twice. 3 times. Hello. Lauren's voice was the same as always. Calm, slightly tired, but familiar warm. I swallowed. Hey. She paused briefly. Are you home yet? No. I closed my eyes, leaning into the pillow. Got stuck in this town. The storm got bad. My car's buried in snow. Decided to stay overnight. I'll head home tomorrow. Oh, Lauren sighed, but there was no concern in her voice. No surprise. Just a fact she registered. Where are you? I asked, staring at the ceiling. A second of silence. Just a second. Then her answer came. At work. Steady. Without hesitation. Did you forget? I have the night shift tonight. A cold shiver ran down my spine, but I forced a small smile, even if she couldn't see it. Yeah, guess I forgot. Are you okay? Yeah, just tired. Then get some sleep. Drive back tomorrow, okay? Yeah, good night. Good night. She hung up. I slowly lowered the phone and stared at the wall. At work. She said she was at work. I had seen her at the motel, sitting across from a man, laughing, leaning toward him. I closed my eyes. Lies. Clean, calm, without the slightest hesitation. I felt something boiling inside me, a hot wave of anger that wouldn't let go so easily. I set my phone aside and took a deep breath. On the nightstand sat a tray with my dinner, a burger, fries, coffee. The smell of hot food was almost intoxicating, and I suddenly realized just how hungry I was. I grabbed the burger, took a bite, washed it down with coffee. Warmth spread through my body, but inside I was still cold. Somewhere deep in my mind, a sticky, unpleasant feeling began to stir. I tried to focus on the food, but my thoughts were already spinning in a whirlwind of memories. The signs I hadn't noticed. The flipped phone screen. I remembered how, a few months ago, Lauren had started holding her phone differently. Before, she always left its screen up. She never hid notifications, never hesitated to respond to messages in front of me. But then, subtly, without any real warning, it changed. She started placing it face down. At first, I didn't think much of it. Hell, I did that sometimes too. But then it became a habit. Every time I entered the room, her phone was already lying face down. One day, I even joked about it. What, are you a spy? Or are you afraid I'll see something important? She had smiled, answering effortlessly. Just a habit. A habit. Now looking back, I knew it wasn't a habit. It was the first sign. I finished my fries, feeling the tension build. The second sign, work. Lauren had started staying late at the hospital more often. Her night shifts became more frequent, sometimes appearing out of nowhere. I remembered the night I had asked her, "Weren't you supposed to be off tonight?" She had responded easily, casually. Someone got sick. I covered for them. It sounded logical, but only now did I realize it had happened too many times. I took another sip of coffee, but it had already lost its taste. What if I was wrong? The thought flickered in my mind, but I dismissed it immediately. No, I had seen it with my own eyes. She wasn't at the hospital. She was in that motel, sitting with a man, laughing, touching his hand, looking at him differently. I leaned back against the pillow and closed my eyes. What now? I wasn't the kind of man to make a scene. I wanted the truth. I wanted to see everything with my own eyes. I would follow her. A cold calmness settled inside me. I would find out who she was meeting. I would find out how far this had gone. I drained the last of my now cold coffee, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, the snow had started falling again. But now, I wasn't going to leave things to fate. The next morning, I woke up early before my alarm. Outside, everything was quiet, as if the storm from the night before had never happened. The snowfall had stopped, and pale dawn light filtered through the curtains. I lay there for a few minutes, trying to process the events of last night, but my mind still felt empty. I knew I had to move forward. The first thing I did was call roadside assistance. The operator's voice was chipper, as if this was just another normal day, not the aftermath of a blizzard. "Hello, how can I help you? My car is stuck on a back road. I need it pulled out of the snow." "Where exactly?" I gave him my coordinates, mentioned the closest landmark. "All right, we're sending a tow truck your way. It might take a little while. Roads are still being cleared." "How long?" "About an hour and a half, maybe 2. "Got it." I hung up and checked my phone. 89% battery. Lauren hadn't texted or called. I stepped into the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and splashed icy water onto my face, hoping it would clear my mind. By the time the tow truck arrived, I was already standing outside the motel, wrapped in my jacket. The driver was an older man with thick gray eyebrows and a cigarette resting in the corner of his mouth. "Hell of a storm last night, huh?" he said, stepping out of the cab and looking me over. "You survived, at least?" "Looks like it." He chuckled and waved his hand. "Where's your car?" We drove to the spot where I had left it. It was nearly buried under the snow. The headlights, the hood, the windshield, everything was hidden beneath a thick white layer. Only the side mirror poked out slightly from its icy prison. "You got buried pretty good," the tow truck driver muttered, assessing the situation. "But no worries. We'll get you out." He pulled a tow cable from the back of his truck, secured it to my front bumper, and motioned for me to get in the car. "When I give the signal, try pressing the gas smoothly, all right?" I nodded, climbed into the driver's seat, and gripped the wheel. Everything inside was just as I had left it. An empty cracker wrapper, the thermos still sitting in the cup holder. The car jolted as the tension in the tow cable pulled it forward. I carefully pressed the gas, and within seconds, the tires found traction on the road again. The vehicle broke free from its snowy trap. I let out a breath. "All set," the tow truck driver called, slapping the hood. I stepped out, pulled some cash from my pocket, and handed it to him. "Thanks. Be careful out there." He took the money with a nod and climbed back into his truck. I got into my car, turned on the heater, and looked ahead. The road back the drive home was much easier than I had expected. The roads had been cleared, the snowfall had stopped, and the sun peeked through the winter haze. As I drove down the highway, I watched the towering snowbanks lining the edges. But there was no usual morning lightness in my mind. I was returning to the house where my wife lived, where my children were waiting, where Lauren had long been leading a double life. My jaw clenched. I knew I wouldn't say anything today. I would just watch. And when the time came, I would be ready. When I arrived home, everything looked the same as always. The kids were playing in the living room. Lauren was making coffee in the kitchen, the familiar aroma filling the house with its usual warmth. But now I saw everything differently. I said nothing, not a word. I kissed my children, changed clothes, pretended to be exhausted. Lauren asked how the trip went, and I told her it was fine. The storm delayed me, but everything was all right. She smiled, calmly, as if nothing had happened. I nodded, took a sip of coffee, and realized that now I needed to know everything. Who was he? How long had this been going on? How far had it gone? I wasn't going to cause a scene without proof. I wasn't going to tear my family apart without knowing the full truth. But once I had everything in my hands, she wouldn't be able to deny it. I opened my laptop and began my search. Private investigator in Chicago. I found someone with good reviews. John Randolph, former police officer, 15 years of experience, specialized in marital affairs. I wrote down his number and called. "Hello, this is Randolph. I need to find out if my wife is cheating on me. Address? Full name? Occupation?" I gave him the information. "What are your suspicions?" I inhaled and said, "I've already seen her with him. Now I need proof. When can you meet?" "Today. Come to my office in an hour." I hung up the phone. The game had begun. Randolph's office was in downtown Chicago, a small space on the second floor of an old brick building. When I walked in, he was already waiting. He motioned for me to sit. "Everything's here." He slid a hard drive, a folder of photographs, and a flash drive across the desk. Videos, call logs, messages, photos. It's more than enough to convince any judge. I took the folder and opened it. 7 days of lies, a week had passed. 7 days of pretending. 7 days of lies. 7 days where I played the role of the devoted husband while my world crumbled to pieces. Every morning, I woke up, made breakfast for the kids, kissed Lauren before her shifts, smiled when she told me she'd be working late at the hospital. But now I knew. I saw her lies. I heard her lies. Every kiss, every glance, every "I love you" had become nothing more than empty words. Today was the day. Randolph had said he had enough evidence. It was time to pick it up. I left the house, telling Lauren I had a work meeting, and drove to Randolph's office. His office was exactly the same as before, small, dimly lit, quiet. He was already seated when I walked in, nodding toward a chair. It's all here. He slid the evidence toward me. A hard drive, a folder filled with photographs, a flash drive, videos, phone records, messages, photos. Enough to prove everything beyond a doubt. I picked up the envelope, flipped it open, and looked inside. And I felt everything inside me begin to boil. The first photo, Lauren entering the motel room. The second, her lover following right behind her. The third, she was embracing him by the elevator. I flipped to the next image and froze. Lauren, and him, the same man she had been sitting with at the cafe. I stared at the picture. Who was he? I didn't know him. Tall, dark hair, a confident gaze. In one of the photos, he was wearing a hospital coat. I lifted my eyes to Randolph. Who is he? Randolph smirked slightly and slid a printed sheet of information across the desk. Dr. Adam Carter, cardiologist, works at the same hospital as your wife. A colleague. I looked back at the photos. A stranger, but standing next to my wife. I turned to the next picture. They were sitting in his car. She leaned toward him, said something with a smile. He ran his fingers down her cheek. She closed her eyes, and then he kissed her. I swallowed hard, feeling a dull wave of rage roll through my body. I plugged the flash drive into Randolph's laptop. The first file. Did you miss me? Of course. What do you think? What if Michael found out? He won't. You lie so sweetly, even I almost believe it. I'm just a good actress. I slammed the laptop shut. Damn it. I clenched my fists, torn between the urge to forget everything and the urge to smash something into pieces. But I did neither. I let out a slow breath, lowered my head, and said in an even voice, "How much do I owe you?" Randolph named the amount. I pulled out the cash, counted it, and placed it in front of him. "What now?" he asked. I didn't answer. I didn't know. But one thing was certain. This game had only just begun. Lauren, my faithful wife, my devoted partner, the woman who looked into my eyes every morning and told me she loved me. She thought her lies were flawless. She thought her tracks were covered, that I was blind, that I would never suspect. She was wrong. I waited. I didn't confront her immediately. I didn't smash the house apart. Didn't air her filth in front of strangers. No. I chose my moment. The perfect moment. Friday night. A regular family dinner. I helped the kids with their homework. Lauren cooked in the kitchen. Everything looked normal, like we were the perfect family. When dinner was ready, she called us to the table. "I made roasted chicken, just the way you all like it," she said with a smile. I looked at her. "How can you smile, Lauren?" I pretended I noticed nothing. I just waited. After dinner, our son went to the living room to use my laptop. His own computer had broken a few days ago. My laptop, the same one where I had left the flash drive with the evidence. I had deliberately left it open in a folder full of video files. I left it there, waiting for him to find it on his own. I watched as he clicked the mouse, opened the folder, selected a file, and before Lauren realized what was happening, the screen lit up. The security camera footage. Lauren in the motel hallway. Adam Carter standing next to her. He leans in. She smiles. Their lips meet. A short kiss, but unmistakable. A second passed, and the world flipped upside down. Dead silence fell over the room. I heard my daughter gasp. My son sat frozen, his hand still resting on the touchpad. Lauren froze too. "What is this?" my son asked quietly, almost in a whisper, his eyes still locked on the screen. I didn't answer. I just watched. Lauren lunged toward the laptop, but my son pushed it away from her. "Mom?" His voice trembled. "Is that you?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't know what to say. "It's not what you think," she began, but her voice broke. I smirked. "Not what I think." My voice was cold. "Then explain." She turned to me, her eyes desperate. Did you set this up?" "I just wanted you to see the truth for yourself, Lauren." Her face went pale. My son looked at her now, his expression darkening. "Mom, are you cheating on Dad?" She took a step toward him, reaching out. "Listen, this isn't what you think, sweetheart." "Don't call me sweetheart," he shouted, jumping up from the couch. "Don't touch me." Lauren flinched. I saw the horror in her eyes. She had lost control. Everything had fallen apart. My daughter sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, tears welling in her eyes. "Mom, why?" Lauren covered her face with her hands. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen." "But you did, Lauren." I stood up, clenching my fists. "You made your choice." She looked at me, and in that moment I saw it. Fear. She knew this was the end. Lauren was destroyed. Her tears, her pleas, her attempts to explain, none of it mattered. The kids had turned away from her. She had lost everything. But I knew it wasn't enough. Now, it was Adam Carter's turn. He thought he could sleep with another man's wife. He thought he could humiliate me. He thought there would be no consequences. He was wrong. I studied the file the detective had compiled. Carter was a cardiologist, a promising doctor, a respected professional. He had a reputation, a contract with a prestigious clinic, patients who trusted him. That's what I used. I drafted an anonymous letter and sent it to the hospital's administration. It included copies of his texts with Lauren, photos of their meetings during work hours, recordings of their conversations. The key detail? I hinted that he had repeatedly used his position to manipulate patients and colleagues. I knew that in a high-profile medical environment, even a whisper of misconduct could destroy a career. 2 days later, Carter was asked to resign voluntarily. His medical license was now under review. But that was just the first step. I found out that he had a fiancée, a beautiful woman, a pharmacist, the woman he had promised to marry. I tracked her down on social media and sent her everything. Photos, text messages, voice recordings. She didn't even ask questions. She broke off the engagement the same day. Carter lost not only his job, but the woman who loved him. He had nothing left, but it still wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel what I felt. Pain, rage, despair. I studied his routine. The only thing left in his life was the gym. It was his last habit, the only thing keeping him sane. Every evening, after his workout, he left the gym exhausted, wearing his headphones, unaware of the world around him. The perfect moment. I waited by his car, my hands stuffed into my jacket pockets. He approached, unlocked the door, and only when he felt my presence did he freeze. I saw the color drain from his face. He recognized me. "Michael, listen, I didn't let him finish." My fist slammed into his jaw, snapping his head back. He crashed against the roof of his car, but managed to stay on his feet. I didn't give him time to recover. The next punch landed in his gut. He doubled over, gasping. But the bastard was tougher than I thought. Carter gritted his teeth, straightened up, and charged at me. He rammed into me with his shoulder, knocking me off balance, and we crashed onto the asphalt. "You're insane," he shouted, struggling to fight back. I didn't answer. I slammed his head into the pavement, then drove my fist straight into his nose. Blood splattered over his lips, but he kept resisting. He grabbed the collar of my jacket and punched me in the temple. For a moment, my vision blurred. I staggered, and he managed to flip us over. Now he was on top. "Do you think you're some kind of hero?" He spat, raising his fist. But he didn't realize I wasn't playing hero. I caught his wrist and drove my elbow into his throat. Carter choked, gasping for air, and I used the opening to smash my fist into his face. Once, twice, 3 times. He tried to crawl away, but I grabbed his hair and slammed his head against the hood of his car. Blood trickled down the metal. Now he wasn't fighting back. I grabbed him by the collar and pinned him against the window. "You destroyed my family, Carter." My voice was steady, but it trembled with rage. "Now, I'll destroy your life." He wheezed, trying to speak, but I punched him again. "You screwed another man's wife. Now you pay the price." He groaned, blood dripping from his lips. I let go of him, allowing him to collapse onto the ground. Carter gasped for air, his chest rising and falling erratically. He pushed himself up onto his elbows, looking at me with dazed, swollen eyes. "Enough," he exhaled. I crouched down beside him, staring straight into his bloodied face. "If I ever see you again, they'll bury you." I spat on the ground next to him, stood up, and turned away. My hands were covered in blood. I wasn't even sure whose was whose anymore. Carter remained on the ground, letting out a low, pained groan. But this wasn't over. I didn't want Lauren to just leave. No, that would be too easy. She had to feel the pain. She had to wake up every morning with terror. She had to fear her own home. She betrayed me. She destroyed our family. She made our children look at her with disgust. Now, I would destroy her. It started the night after her betrayal was exposed. Lauren had been sleeping in the guest room. She didn't dare lay in our bed. I waited until the dead of night. It was around 3 a.m. when I played the first recording. Carter's low, husky voice filled the silence. Did you miss me? Of course. What do you think? What if Michael found out? He won't. You lie so sweetly, even I almost believe it. I'm just a good actress. The volume wasn't loud, just enough for it to seep into her dreams. I stood in the darkness outside her door, listening. It took 5 minutes before I heard her breath hitch. She woke up. Michael? Her voice was frightened. Then she heard Carter's voice again. Did you miss me? I turned off the recording. Silence fell over the house again. But I had already seen enough. She had jerked upright, flicking on the bedside lamp, clutching the blanket to her chest. Her hands were trembling. Good. Let her know. This was just the beginning of her nightmares. The next morning, Lauren looked wrecked. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face hollowed by exhaustion. The kids avoided her. I sat at the breakfast table with my son and daughter, talking about their grades, their plans. Like everything was normal. Lauren sat in the corner of the kitchen, staring into her empty coffee cup. She tried to speak. I ignored her. She no longer existed. When she went to the bathroom, I left her the first message. Scrawled on the mirror in black marker. You're a good actress. She came out a minute later and froze. Her face went pale. She knew it was me. She turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Michael. I lifted my head and smiled. She shuddered. Good. Let her tremble. Now, she was afraid of me. She flinched when she heard my voice. She stopped sleeping at night. She started leaving for work early and coming home late just to avoid being in the house with me. But I kept pushing her closer to the edge. One evening, when she came home, I had spread printed photographs of her and Carter all over the house. Everywhere. The bedroom, the hallway, the kitchen table, the living room couch. Lauren walked in, saw them, and snapped. Michael, stop. She screamed, scrambling to pick them up. I leaned back against the wall, smirking. What? You don't like it? I asked casually. I didn't like watching you crawl into bed with him, either. Her lips trembled. I can't do this anymore. I tilted my head. Then leave. She froze. She had nowhere to go. I had stripped her of everything. No support. No family. No future. Now, she lived in the cage she had built for herself. And every day, that cage got smaller. How long would she last? Lauren was no longer living. She was existing. I saw it in her movements, in her vacant stare, in the way she spoke to our children, cautiously, as if afraid to push them even further away than she already had. She had become a shadow, because of me, but not because of what I had done, because of what she had done. I simply made her see her true self. Another 2 weeks passed. The house had become a prison for Lauren. I knew she wanted to leave. But where? I had stripped her of everything. Her reputation, her family, the trust of her children. She couldn't run to Carter's house. His life was already in ruins. She couldn't turn to friends who had taken a traitor. She was trapped, and she knew it. Every day, I watched her break. I saw how her fingers tensed nervously whenever we were in the same room, how she flinched at the sound of my footsteps, how she shrank in fear when I simply looked at her. And one night, I decided to end the game. Lauren was sitting in the dark living room, her head buried in her hands. When I entered, she didn't even lift her eyes. I stepped closer and sat across from her. Do you want to talk? I asked. She slowly raised her head. Her eyes were dead. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I smirked slightly. You gave me this gift yourself, Lauren. She swallowed hard, running a hand down her face. You broke me. I leaned in closer. No, you broke yourself. She closed her eyes, exhaled. What do you want? I leaned back. I want you gone. Her eyes flicked open. You let me go? I smiled. No, Loudon. I'm throwing you out. She went pale. But where? I have nothing. And what did I have when you were screwing Carter? Silence. She bit her lip, then slowly nodded. You win. I stood up. I always won, Lauren. You just never noticed before. She rose to her feet, unsteady. I'll pack my things. Not everything. I looked at her coldly. You leave with only what you brought into this house. She closed her eyes. Understood. I watched her walk toward the stairs. Saw how her fingers clenched into fists, how her shoulders trembled. But I felt no pity. I felt justice. Lauren was gone. I stood at the door, watching as she walked out without looking back. The children stood in the hallway. Dad, she's not coming back? My daughter asked. I looked at her. No. My son swallowed hard, lowering his gaze. Good. I closed the door. It was over. I won. Dear friends, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss new episodes. See you soon.